Hello everyone, welcome to a lovely Friday in this clown decade, the decade where things are only getting worse before they're getting better. And today we are going through another Novara Media video, and if I end up becoming a Novara Media reply guy, I don't really care. They are the people who nearly got Corbyn into number 10, and in doing so, it has made sure that absolutely everything is in the framing of the left wing when it comes to any news article on any issue, whether it be the economy, culture, anything like that. The lens most people look through in the media is directly from the far left wing. At least for most people. You've still got your right wing articles from the Telegraph and the Express and the Mail and all that. But when it comes to the zeitgeist, it is hideously left wing. I mean, just look at what Channel 4's current affairs show The Last Leg decided to do when the World Cup was held in Qatar, and they banned the captains from wearing the gay armbands.
We just can't ignore dead workers on the floor.
Alright, I'm not going to subject you to that cancer anymore. Yes, that was just one line for the migrants in Qatar who were essentially slaves, and many of whom died building the stadiums and infrastructure Qatar needed to actually host the game. Of course, the much larger issue in Qatar is the fact that you can spend 7 years in jail if you are openly gay. And unofficially, of course, you can be executed. Yes, that's the part we need to focus on, the thing that's actually quite popular in the Middle East and many parts of Africa. Well, to be fair, slavery is still about in most of those countries too. But it's how far left-wing the zeitgeist is at the moment. The gays matter a lot more than the ordinary people who are working and dying against their will. Anyway, that is my cope for why I will continue to cover Novara Media, even though Keir Starmer has kicked most of the millennial commies out of Labour, because it's still pushing all the parties left, so they need to be told how they're wrong. Anyway, as you can tell, this is going to be a video about immigration, and specifically Novara Media talking about Suella Braverman having in their mind a bad answer to the Home Affairs Committee, so I will just let them take it away.
The Tories are always telling us that asylum seekers should be entering the UK through, quote, safe and legal routes.
Yeah, they probably should. If they do it illegally, it seems a bit suspicious, especially if they're coming from France. And if they're doing it in unsafe ways, they are risking death. And if the Tory government is saying, well, please don't go ways where you can die, and please come through legally so it's easier to process you, that's just good advice.
And no one says this more so than Home Secretary Suella Braverman, who likes to call anyone who comes through any other means illegal.
Well, if they're not coming through a legal route, they must be coming through an illegal route. So yes, they are illegal migrants. By default.
We have already several safe and legal routes through which people who are genuine asylum seekers can make their application. And I'm very proud, as I've set out already, of our record of welcoming people who are genuinely fleeing persecution.
Yes, both of these things are true. We do indeed have safe and legal means to apply for asylum in the UK and to travel to the UK to claim said asylum. Over the past year, the net migration figures have hit 500,000, which, you know, I'm not just saying that and throwing it away. That is a massive issue. It's just a topic for another video because there's a lot more to say on that. But part of the reason that it's such a large number is because we have received Afghani, Ukrainian, and Hong Kong refugees who have applied for asylum, come by safe and legal routes, and managed to claim said asylum here and live here. So there is absolutely no reason that we should be accepting people who cross the channel illegally. Especially since, as I went through in the last channel crossing video, most of them are told to lie about their asylum applications and try and get the free money and hotel before they're shipped off to be part of the Albanian drug gangs.
We cannot accept the situation where people are bypassing those routes, jumping the queue effectively on illegitimate bases and making fabricated claims of being victims.
Yes, I completely agree with that. I just wish Suella Braverman was a bit quicker about doing something about it. But beggars can't be choosers, and in terms of Home Secretaries, I think so far she's being better than Priti Patel. But she can easily do a lot worse. So as ever, my hopes are still high, and they're going to be dashed quite expertly, I can imagine.
So, there are abundant, safe and legal routes, and anyone who doesn't take them is an economic migrant lying to us about needing asylum.
Well, yeah, even the BBC did some investigative journalism on this, found some Albanian human traffickers, and were texting them pretending to be a migrant in distress. And, yeah, they were basically told to lie. They were told to lie to claim asylum. So let's not act like this doesn't happen. This is very common for people who are crossing the channel. They pay to cross the channel because they will get some free nights in a hotel in the UK. they will also get some benefits from the UK government while they are being processed, and in the meantime they can go off to any city in the UK and be part of an Albanian drug gang, and in the end send all the money back to Albania to their families, because it is mostly single young men who are crossing the border, or the channel, I don't know, they're the same thing.
Now, plenty of MPs have tried to pin down Braverman over what exactly those routes are, but she's been pretty good at evading those questions.
Well, as mentioned before, we're up to 500,000 net migrants, and a large part of that is because a lot of legitimate refugees have come over, so they clearly exist. I mean, this wasn't the hardest thing in the world. I just went to Google, Michael, typed claiming asylum in the UK, and the first thing that came up was a link to the government's own website giving you clear and concise instructions on how to claim asylum in the UK. And essentially all you need to do is have documentation such as your passport, have proof that you have somewhere to stay, and then you will be screened and interviewed to check that yes, you are a genuine asylum seeker. The problem is that the Albanians are torching all of their documents, so when they do get to the border, it's a lot harder to process them, and that's why there is now a massive queue of people they simply can't process because they've got no documents. Now, why we can't just put them on a plane and send them back to Rwanda, well, you'd have to ask the human rights lawyers for that, because they're making that a massive pain in the arse. Oh, and if you claim you're under 18, you'll also get a load more help from the government. That's why a lot of young men claim they are under 18. This is all recorded, we know they do this, and yet Novara media will still claim that we are barbarians and heartless beasts who will not help their fellow man. Well, I don't particularly like helping liars.
Until now, that is. Braverman has appeared before the Home Affairs Select Committee where Tory MP Tim Loughton set her this challenge.
Oh, excellent. So they are going to show us a classic wets versus dries debate. If anyone tells you that the Tories are right-wing, show them this video because it will probably show them how there are actually mad leftists within the Tory party who actually have positions of power. And just so you know, they have done from at least the 1800s.
Just a bit of role play. I'm a 16-year-old orphan from an East African country escaping a war zone and religious persecution.
See, already this is an example of how I don't like the wets. Oh, in my hypothetical, I will be very incredibly hypothetical, in fact, and not name a particular country because that might be offensive. I won't say what's the war will be about, and I will just say general religious persecution, when really what it should be saying is, if I'm a 16-year-old Somali orphan who is persecuted because I'm Christian and have to come to the UK, what do I do? That's a much better way of putting it than just, in this East African country where, can't say what the war might be about. Was it piracy in Somalia? I don't know, can't say that. Or religious persecution, just generic religious persecution. You know, it's not really one way or the other, it could be anything. Just be direct. If you're doing a hypothetical, try and make it as realistic as possible and use real-life examples. It makes them much easier to answer.
And I have a sibling legally in the United Kingdom at the moment. What is a safe and legal route for me to come to the United Kingdom?
Well, luckily there's this thing called the World Wide Web, and you can Google what to do in that case. Basically, you do the same thing as an over 18 asylum seeker would do, which is to apply for the screening, go to the asylum walk-in centre and do the screening, but you do it with that relative that's in the UK. That's the only way that this is different. And the safe and legal route is getting on a plane over here, or a ferry or something like that. And if you can't do that, well then maybe you do need to get an illegal route to a safe country. How the hell is someone from East Africa going to do that by coming over to Britain? They'd be a lot better off trying to get to Israel or Italy or something like that.
Well, we have... you're fleeing which country, sorry?
Any African country.
Any African country. Well...
Could be any continent, but let's say any African country. I don't want to name one because then their Prime Minister might have a go at me for demonising their population. So let's just theoretically talk about an African country which is going through a period of turbulence.
See what I mean by the wets, by the way? Oh, don't mention any particular country. The Prime Minister might have a go at me. Why would he have a go at you for a hypothetical? Somalia isn't a nice country. Why do you think Mo Salah never went back? It's because Britain's better, but also because it's a whole war-torn state with barely a legal process going for it.
Well, we have an asylum system and people can put in applications for asylum.
How would I do that?
You literally get to the UK by any legal means, so that's either by plane or by boat. I.e. you go through some type of port, whether that be an airport or a boat port, or through the Channel Tunnel, and then when you get to border control, you say, I'd like to apply for asylum, please. The Channel migrants that we catch, that is exactly what they do. They are put straight into border control and they all say, "I'd like asylum, please." You just do the same thing, except you're in a legal place to do it, where you could probably actually do it quite quickly.
Well, you can do it through the safe and legal routes that we have. We have offered 390,000 places to people seeking safety from various countries around the world.
Yep, come in by any legal port, ask for asylum, you'll be sent to an asylum centre. It's actually quite easy.
I'm not Syrian, I'm not Afghan, I'm not Ukrainian, not any of those specific schemes. The Dub scheme is historic. What scheme's open to me?
Ah, well, that's not the question you asked at first. You asked, what's legal routes can I go by? She answered that question. Now you've moved the goalposts. It's, but there aren't any schemes for me as a Somalian. Sorry, generic East African. But for some reason, when we're on schemes, we can name all the countries you want. Okay. Apparently, we're not demonising Syria or Afghanistan here by naming names. Don't know how it works. Don't ask me.
Well, if you are able to get to the UK, you are able to put in an application for asylum.
You slipped up a bit there, Suella. You shouldn't say if you are able to get to the UK. You need to say if you can get to any port.
But I would only enter the UK illegally then, wouldn't I?
Well, that would, if you put in your application for asylum upon arrival, that would be the process that you enter.
Oh no. That's exactly what the channel migrants do, unfortunately, Suella. You need to make sure you add that you maybe even voluntarily go to border control. Because that's what some Albanians are doing. If they don't get caught on the way over, they do just disappear. No one can find them. And there are stories of these illegal migrants going into towns and asking to use phones to ask for directions and money to get to Manchester or London or other big cities. So he's unfortunately going to make the point that, yes, if you do just come in and claim asylum, that is legal. Well, that's what the channel migrants are doing, unfortunately.
How could I arrive in the UK if I didn't have permission to get onto an aircraft legally to arrive in the UK?
This hypothetical is getting more and more and more specific. It needs to be a bit more specific because now it's up to Suella to make up a story of why he's being refused permission. And it's your hypothetical. You can't just say, well, what if I'm refused permission? Well, I don't know. What have you not been refused permission for?
Let me just invite other colleagues if there's anything they want to add.
I mean, you could engage with UNHCR. I mean, depending which country you're from, you could engage with UNHCR, and that would be a way of getting leave to enter the UK in order to put in an asylum claim. But I accept that there are some countries where that would not be possible.
And again, if we're talking about East Africa, and they are literally out of options like this, well, yeah, maybe you will have to illegally go to another country. But why would that be the UK? The only time I can think that would be possible is if you hid in the landing gear of an airplane, and then you arrived in the UK via that means. But it's a lot easier just to either cross a land border or cross the Mediterranean Sea to get to Italy or something.
I think the point is that there's a shortage of safe and legal routes other than for specific groups of people that we have generously offered safe haven to.
I mean, I think I'd take these claims a bit more seriously if he used an example where people actually have struggled to get over to the UK, but there's plenty of Somalians in the country that are refugees, as there are in the rest of Europe, especially in Sweden. I mean, grenade attacks also went up not long after a bunch of the Somalians came over to Sweden, but, you know, that's a different issue. But this hypothetical was a bit nonsense. It was just, how do I apply for asylum in the UK? Well, you go to border control and ask for asylum. Okay, what if I move the goalposts a bit? Oh, well, that's still quite easy. I can still score a goal there. Okay, what if I move them off the pitch and Suella just says, you know, do you want to step in and help me out here? And he says, well, you know, you got the UN, they can help you claim asylum. And then, oh, what if that doesn't happen? It's like, well, man, how far down the rabbit hole do you want to go? Look, it's an imperfect system. We all get it. But they literally answered your questions, and then you just made it up at the end of, oh, sounds like no one can actually apply for asylum unless we specifically invite them here. No, that's not what was said at all. There's quite a few safe and legal ways to come in, as Suella explained, as her colleague explained. But this is the problem with the wets in the Tory party. They have an idea in their head, just like leftists do, of how the UK is run. They assume it's racist, they assume that we're discriminatory, and just go with that. When really, okay, yeah, we do have a few schemes, especially say for Ukraine or Afghanistan or Hong Kong. Places where it's quite easy to make a case to let some refugees in. Hong Kong used to be British territory. In Afghanistan, we had people who helped out when we were over there in the war. Ukrainians are genuinely suffering under quite a large amount of missile attacks from Russia. You know, it's fair enough to allow these people over, and then, you know, Christians being persecuted in, say, Pakistan or East Africa. Yeah, sure, they have legitimate asylum claims, but when it comes to channel migrants, a lot of them don't, which is why a lot of them disappear. And why over 70% of the asylum claims from young males are either unfulfilled because they go away, or they are just outright rejected by the asylum office. When it comes to illegal migrants, people are not talking about genuine refugees or asylum seekers. They are talking about the people who lie to get asylum, stay in the country, and join drug gangs.
It's such an effective line of questioning.
They didn't even have an example of where this has happened. It's just nonsense hypotheticals for all I care. I want a hard example of where that has happened, because I don't believe that it's happened. It's, oh, let me come up with this hypothetical. I'm not basing it on anything, though. It's a lot less hard-hitting as when I say Somalians have found it relatively easy to actually apply for asylum in the UK.
And I mean, we've been saying this for months on this show. I mean, she says this moral, people are jumping the queue if they don't take the proper routes. The proper routes don't exist.
I mean, they are jumping the queues because they get sent straight to asylum centres for screening if they come over illegally. If they go through a port, they will be given appointment times and all that, and I believe they'll actually go live with whoever they have written permission to live with until the screening. And somehow net migration goes up by 200,000 in the past year, with asylum seekers being one of the factors for this massive increase. Apparently these safe and legal routes don't exist, even though Suella Braverman's just explained them. He gets border control, I want asylum, cool, let's get you quickly screened. Okay, these seem to be in order, right, we'll do a proper interview another time, go live with them, you know, see you in 2 weeks, whatever. To say these don't exist is a bit mad.
And I think that was really, really clear when the moment when sort of you could see in Suella Braverman's head, she was sort of saying, do I really have to say this? He's like, how would they apply? She says, well, if you were able to get to the UK.
I mean, yeah, fair enough, it was a bad answer, but I still stand by his hypothetical being awful, and his excuse for not dealing in specifics being, oh, the Prime Minister would tell me off. When really I think the reason he didn't go into specifics is to avoid Suella Braverman being able to say, well, Somalians can come over via these routes, whereas if you just say generic East African country, well, it's different for each one.
You can apply if you come to the UK, if you're an asylum seeker. Well, all the people trying to come to the UK right now who don't already have a right to be here, you know, so most asylum seekers can't just get on a plane and come here because they don't have a visa.
Yeah, the visa thing was covered. You can go to the UN. And then again, if that can't happen, well, yeah, all right. Then you are in desperate times, desperate measures, etc. But why would an East African come to Britain when there are literally hundreds of other safe countries they would have to pass through to get here?
Right. The only way to get to the UK is to cross the Channel. For billions of people around the world, if they want to come to the UK to claim asylum, the only way they can come here is to cross the Channel.
Oh, so just let them come over. Screw it, it'll be fine. Yeah, they have to come from that really unsafe country called France. You know, they've travelled through hundreds of other countries where they can claim asylum. They've travelled thousands of miles, don't you know, to get to France, only to then cross the border into Britain. Think, Michael, think.
And then not only will they get, you know, it will take months and years to process their claim and they risk being sent to Rwanda.
It's a thing that's never seems to be mentioned whenever the Rwanda story comes up. They are sent to Rwanda and put into UK asylum centres there, where they will be processed. And if they are genuine asylum seekers, they will be able to come back and, you know, as asylum seekers. Whereas if not, Rwanda will keep them as the economic migrants that they are, because they want the migrants. It's literally the myth of consent meme. Britain and Rwanda shaking hands saying, yeah, this is how we will deal with these illegal migrants till we can process them. And then you've got activist human rights lawyers saying there's someone you forgot to ask.
But what they'll have is Suella Braverman standing up on national television and constantly moralising and saying, these people should have applied for asylum the proper way.
Dude, seriously, what is going on in Albania that means that 2 to 5% of their male population have to come over here? What is going on in Albania? Please tell me.
There is literally no other way to apply for asylum than cross the Channel.
They are in France, man. That is also not true. You could get help from the UN, in which the UK has an agreement that the UN can give them temporary leave to join the UK to go to border control to apply for asylum. Maybe a huge solution to this is just to have it so that you can apply for a visa if you are planning to claim asylum. And then you can have a Zoom meeting with an immigration officer, have a quick screening there, and then they can say yes, they can have a visa or not. And then when they do get that visa, they can come over and have, the bigger screening with all the documents that they need, and, everything else you need to claim asylum in the UK. Maybe that would be a solution to this, instead of relying on the UN and then having it so people think, oh, coming over via the illegal means seems to be working out a lot better. So then when we have that reasoning, people won't have this excuse of saying, oh, it's too hard to come over to the UK legally to apply for asylum, which is obviously a lie, but honestly, giving people a pre-asylum visa probably isn't the worst solution in the world.
And do it in the UK, as she said in that answer.
Surely this should have been a line of questioning that the press made at the beginning of this Conservative government, in particular in the beginning of, as far back as Priti Patel.
It's something that Novara media never asked. Why ever to go at other media outlets? You are a media outlet. You actually could have asked them yourselves.
My jaw honestly hit the floor when she said, once you arrive in the UK, you can make an application for asylum.
Yes, I think she should have expanded on it, as I said before, and said, when you come in via a legal route, on a plane, on a boat, on a train or whatever. And when I say on a boat, I obviously, as I kept saying before, into a port where there is border control.
It was like a real, it was a real jaw-dropping moment, because it was like, is this the same woman who has been demonizing people for actually making it to UK shores, for taking, as you said, the only available route, an accessible route?
I'm sorry, it's just not true that it is the only accessible route for them. It is just the easiest way to get in. Albanians are perfectly entitled to apply for jobs in the UK and get work visas from that. They can do that. The thing is that a lot of them, as I constantly say and constantly have gone through in the last videos, they come over to join in with their ethnic groups, which are predominantly in drug gangs in the southeast. This is a well-recorded phenomenon, and when it comes to other ethnicities crossing the border, basically the only ones that probably are real are Syrians and Afghanistanis. But the problem with them is, as everyone keeps pointing out, especially that Tory MP before, there are schemes to make sure that we can get them over and processed. There aren't for Albanians, because no one in Albania is being persecuted. Even the texts that were sent to the BBC journalist were saying just claim you're in debt. That's apparently good enough to get you on the asylum waiting list.
You look at her predecessor, Priti Patel, who she is very much in line with politically on this issue. That's someone who spoke about using wave machines in the Channel in order to push small boats back.
Yeah, it's amazing what solutions people have come up with when you can't just do what the government is supposed to do and enforce the borders. And yes, by the way, that does mean by force. You can't enforce something without force.
So if you understand that those boats that you are trying to push back into the Channel are carrying refugees...
I don't know how many times I'm going to have to say this. No, they are not genuine refugees. They are constantly told to lie. Constantly. The people who organise the dinghy crossings, they are doing an illegal service. It's all illegal by default. There's also a warning on the overview of claiming for asylum that you can be put into jail for up to 2 years or deported if you lie on your asylum application. Well, by default, they're all doing that as well. They are breaking so many laws, it's unreal. But you call them refugees because they're not white. Can we just be honest about that?
And not people who are hauling their entire family into, what is often almost a death trap.
Again, it's in the last video, but I think the figure was something like 60% of people coming over on the boat are Albanians. And again, you'll have to go back to the last video to get these figures accurate. But it was something like a fifth or a sixth of those Albanians were women, were females. And then of the rest who were males, about a fifth were claiming to be under 18s, who then it turned out weren't under 18. So this claim of, oh, people are dragging their families over and going through a death trap with their family, yeah, not true. It is literally mostly just single men from Albania. And the reason for that, well, they're probably off for an adventure to get some free plunder from us.
Then you have to accept that it is the position of the UK government, essentially, that unless you come from a specific set of countries, you cannot access refuge in this country.
Oh, wait. Yeah, no, I do want that. Yeah, that's a really good idea. Why would we accept any refugees from Albania? There's no political persecution going there for any reason based on race, religion, etc. It's a relatively free country for Eastern Europe, yeah. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. We should say, oh, these places that actually do have genuine persecution, yeah, they're the ones that you can come over from. That's a really good idea. That's probably better than the visa option I had, or maybe just allow free visas from those particular countries. Yeah, no, that's a really good idea. Thanks for offering it up. I might write to my MP about it, actually.
That we do not accept refugees in this country, with the exception of a specific limited number of countries for which there is a specific program.
Based, yeah. Good idea. Once again, she reiterated it, so I'll reiterate. That is a very good idea. Let's do that.
So, given that it is now clear that Home Secretary, that the current Home Secretary and the previous Home Secretary are aware of that, we can now essentially count out the idea that Britain has this proud history of welcoming and accepting refugees.
No, that's not true. We still do, and we still have that, and we can still continue to do that. We will just say, oh, these people abusing the system, yeah, we don't let them do that because we want actual refugees here. It is quite amazing, isn't it? They have completely made up a story in their head that people crossing the border are genuine refugees. When, as the statistic from the last video was, it's like 93% of women and children who claim asylum do get it passed, whereas when it comes to the majority, which are men, 30%, something like that, pass their asylum claims. So, no, yeah, we're still probably doing a pretty good job, I'll be honest.
Secondly, we can understand that the deaths in the Mediterranean aren't the result of this kind of decontextualized intervention from a few savvy people traffickers.
Why are we talking about the Mediterranean? We're talking about refugees coming to the UK crossing the English Channel. That's that's not our problem. We're worried about the English Channel crossers. The Mediterranean, that's the problem with Italy, Greece, though I don't know why you'd claim refuge in Greece, Spain, France, anyone else with a coastline around the Mediterranean.
That actually this is a systemically created phenomenon by the deliberate and willful negligence and neglect of our government.
Well, this has just got madder and madder. Somehow people trying to cross the Mediterranean is the UK's fault. I mean, if they were drowning trying to get to Gibraltar, I could maybe accept that somewhat, but that's not generally happening. It's when they're trying to cross to Italy. That's the main thing that hit the headlines anyway. And then Spain obviously have an issue with Morocco. So I'd love to see where this thought process goes. We are systemically getting people killed in the Mediterranean somehow.
And finally...
Oh no, she just does the Giga Chad, refuses to elaborate. Okay, fair enough.
We can see that the point of this government, and the point of previous iterations of this government in particular, has not been to create a cohesive immigration system.
Well, in your mind, what's a cohesive immigration system? Because I can only imagine your cohesive immigration system is to have completely open doors to the entire world. Well, most people that live here don't want that, because it's causing too many problems with our semi-open borders as we have them already. Albanian drug gangs in the southeast just being one of the many examples. And we probably won't have a coherent immigration policy, in my mind, as I want it, for quite a while, because even with the Tory government being in power with an 80-seat majority, as you can tell from the leadership kerfuffles we've had, well, for the past decade, quite frankly, it's due to massive splits in the Tory party. One of the big ones being the reason we got Brexit, which is because basically the party's full of people who are either somewheres or anywheres. I.e. there are internationalists within the Tory party, but there are also quite a few nationalists in the party, which is why you've got constant swings with, say, Suella Braverman saying she wants immigration down to the tens of thousands, which a lot of people have said, but Suella Braverman seems to actually want that. And then you've got people like Jeremy Hunt, say, or Liz Truss, ironically, who say we need more immigration to, say, improve growth and just look at line going up. So with the two opposite ends of the immigration debate in government, of course you're not going to have a coherent one. But when you get Labour in, as much as Keir Starmer says he wants to wean the UK off the reliance on immigration to grow GDP, I don't for a second believe his lies, because that would obviously be hounding him down by his own party as racist. I mean, for God's sake, it was bad enough that he had to print out the lyrics to God Save the Queen, as it was at the time, for the Labour Party conference. You wouldn't even have to do that for the Tory conference, I reckon. I don't even think you'd have to do that. But literally, that's our choices. Plastic nationalism that's just going to be turned into complete globalism, and fight between globalists and nationalists in the Tory party. They seem to be our only two options, unfortunately. So may as well join the Tory party and really push for the nationalism.
You know, it's not been to create a process, but rather it's been to create chaos and this ongoing spectacle of violence. We saw this with Braverman refusing to transfer people to available accommodation and instead keeping them in Manston, a detention centre that had, public health outbreaks, that had outbreaks of MRSA and was overcrowded and was clearly unfit for human habitation.
It's another problem I have. There's no other side to this story when it comes to Novara media and leftists. It's, Manston, it wasn't fit for human habitation or that. And yeah, it was pretty poor what was going on there. But it's never the side of the story of the reason it was bad is because it had a max capacity of 1,600 people, but so many people were crossing the channel, both, whatever, that 4,000 people ended up in there because it's impossible to keep up with that level of people. I mean, this is why it's called a crisis. The Home Office just can't keep up. The number of people crossing the channel has doubled every year. It's exponential. If this trend continues, it'll be 100,000 people crossing next year. And you know the stat I brought up before, the 500,000 net migration stat? That is without this 50,000 that have crossed so far this year. I don't know what Novara Media's answer is, apart from just saying, anyone who arrives illegally is just automatically an asylum seeker. Talk about opening the gates for the invaders. That's exactly what they want. But they're internationalists and they can't see a problem with it.
Her explicitly refusing to offer alternative accommodation, even though that alternative accommodation was available, is clear that the strategy of this government is to feed and cultivate a sense of chaos at the border, in order to then further justify its heavy-handedness and its ability to project a tough on immigration stance.
It's just a total mindset problem with Novara Media. What do you expect us to do with 50,000 people we didn't expect to come over or don't have a process for dealing with? What do you expect to happen? I mean, say you're organising a party and then it's gate crashed by a massive group of people you didn't expect. What is your process for dealing with that? Most people would shut the door on them and make sure they get out, but for some reason, because we're a big country, we just have to assume that they'd make the party better when they won't necessarily, and in fact, from their recent history, can probably assume that they won't. And if some of those people would make the party better, well, they can blame the bad uns for that. Dealing with 50,000 people, you can't go through that individually within a year. We've had a bad enough time trying to get all Ukrainians, Afghanistanis and Hong Kong people processed for asylum. But there's no reasoning with these people, so I don't know why I'm trying to do it.
Which, then strengthens their grip on Britain's public consciousness, which it has whipped into this state of frenzy and fear.
Look, a big reason people worry about this is because of the first-hand comments of what goes on in these areas by the people that live there. They don't like it, and then when it comes to the rest of the country, they can tell they don't like it, think, well, I probably wouldn't like it either, given they're my countrymen, and they're saying things are happening to the town I wouldn't like happening to my town, and so obviously they're going to push back against it, for self-interested reasons, such as, I don't want my town to be like that, but also to help their fellow countrymen, and have it so that their town doesn't change beyond a point of no return. And maybe the Tories are trying to do this so that they can keep power on the immigration debate. But what's a lot more likely is that they're just incompetent and these problems are actually, real. But you probably live in a nice area of London where you don't think this is ever going to touch you. Whereas at the same time, you're probably avoiding areas of London that are let's just say that have the same problems as these towns that do not like the illegal migrants coming over.
And so we know, and that has just been, completely reinforced by that clip, that is the function of anti-migrant rhetoric by this government.
The function of anti-migrant rhetoric is to say, here is how people can apply for asylum in the UK. Yes, it's impossible in some places, but then, as I keep saying, the obvious question isn't asked as to why they are illegally coming to the UK when there are hundreds of other safe countries that they have to go through first.
But for me, as I said at the beginning, I don't understand why it's taken this long, given that this has been the policy of the government for a very long time, to essentially deliberately cultivate a context in which people are having to cross the channel in these dangerous and distressing ways and to cultivate this sense of chaos.
Again, they don't have to do that. You can get a visa from Albania to come to the UK. And again, as has been mentioned, countries where genuine war or political persecution has been occurring, yeah, we actually do let refugees from there come over.
Given that that has actually been the strategy of the government for so long, where has our press been on actually asking that simple question of, hey, could you just outline to me what the safe and legal route actually looks like in a tangible way?
I like how Novara media are saying this when they are literally a news outlet. I like how they're also saying this when they've been on, they've had representatives on Question Time, on BBC News panels. Michael Walker's been on this week with Andrew Neil when it was on. They're on the TV quite a lot. You actually could have asked them. You could have asked people there, and you never did. So I don't know why you're having to go at the rest of the media when you yourself don't do it and have been in perfectly legitimate positions to do so. I don't get it.
Is it practicable? Is it actionable for someone who is fleeing violence or fleeing conflict? Clearly not.
I don't know, Ukrainians, Afghanis and Hong Kongers did it pretty well. But I don't want to be flippant about that. It's not unreasonable to say that, yes, people might take illegal routes into countries because there is literally no other option. It's not true when it comes to crossing over from a safe country such as France to come over to another safe country such as Britain, which is why we are selective on which people we do have schemes for when it comes to claiming asylum. And for some reason, because we can't just have a generic net to cover the entire world, that means that we're bad. Well, the problem is that if we do that, that's going to allow 6 billion people to come in and claim asylum. And we're having enough trouble as we're climbing the population to 70 million. That's also because we're not building houses and infrastructure, but that's a different story, and people get mad when I point that out. Don't get me wrong, I know demand has a lot of pressure coming from that side because of immigration, but even if you got rid of all the immigrants, we'd still have a housing crisis. That's all I'm saying.
And I think that to me is the real failure here, that these questions have not been asked by our press, and instead our press has been encouraging and pushing the government to be even more hardline and to be even more deceptive on these questions.
Citation, please. It's this whole thing of when say, the BBC or the Times actually just presenting facts, that's them being right-wing and racist and putting pressure on the Tory government to be even more right-wing, which oddly enough is exactly why I went to the right wing, because I saw all these facts being pushed out, I saw they were all true, and I was told they were right wing, so I thought, well, I'm on the side of truth, I'll go right wing then. But obviously then the right wing does that sometimes, so now I am, somewhere between centre right and far right. You're just comfortably right wing, we'll say. But the biggest example of this is everyone seems to have found a really old tweet by Ash Sarkar that I covered a year ago, in which she claims that The Spectator is peddling the Great Replacement theory, just because Lionel Shriver of The Spectator points out that demographics are changing in the UK. And at no point does she actually bring up the word Great Replacement or make a value judgment. She simply says in the article that it is perfectly reasonable to worry about statistics like this. And this is exactly what's happening here. This woman from Novara Media, I didn't even pay attention to her name and I don't care, but she is claiming that because the media are pointing out facts and reporting on that, they must want the numbers to be smaller, which there's absolutely no evidence for. In fact, in the last video I went through, when the BBC were going through the facts and presenting them, the presenter didn't say that it's an enormous rise in the amount of Albanians coming over or anything like that. He just kept using the word changing or shifting. So I do not believe the media are on any particular side here. I just think they're doing what they always do, which is presenting facts that are divisive. And if some facts are divisive, then they will make sure that they put in some paragraphs there that make you think it's divisive.
Rather than asking the kind of like critically interrogating these policies, which fall apart under the slightest bit of pressure, as we could see in that clip.
Yeah, no, that's not what we saw at all, but I've gone through all that. Once again, though, she has to make sure that, it's the media's fault. Well, it's the media's fault for not putting these MPs under interrogation. Well, Novara Media, you are part of the media. Why haven't you done anything about it? Well, the answer is because they're very lazy and just do what I do for a hobby, which is just comment on things and make sure that their own side like it. And as for all of you on my side, I am very happy that you still watch my channel. I do greatly appreciate it. And I appreciate all the comments you leave too. I do go through them once in a while and do chuckle at a lot of them, so don't worry about that. You are very much appreciated. But before I go rambling on about you lot, who are the real heroes of my YouTube channel, that is everything I have time for today. So, once again, as usual, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.